Hello, I thought I would take the time to just outline the first basics of getting to play the mandolin, the sort of things you need to think about, how to hold the mandolin, what sort of pick to use, before we get into actually learning to play some tunes and some songs. So, holding the mandolin itself, first of all, the first thing that I would recommend is that you make sure you have a strap. Having a strap on the mandolin is going to help it to stay in position without you having to grip it with both hands or stop it swinging about. If you've got an F-style mandolin, one with a fancy scroll up here, then you can attach one end of a strap to the F, often using a little loop of string or leather, and the other end to the strap button on the back. If, like me, you're playing an A-style mandolin, you can either tie this end of the strap using a piece of string to the nut up here, to the top, just behind the nut under the strings, and use the strap pin again. Or like me, what you could do is put another strap pin here on the back of the neck, which is an easy enough job to do. It might be a bit frightening, the idea of screwing something into your brand new mandolin, but if you drill a tiny pilot hole, you can buy these cheaply from music shops, these strap buttons. Mount it there. I prefer that system because it keeps out the way of your hand when you're playing up here. And then you put the mandolin's strap so that it's coming forward over this shoulder, behind this shoulder and down round you. And I have the mandolin strap so it's long enough for the mandolin to sit just on my lap or just slightly above it. Some people prefer to have their mandolins a bit higher. They find it easier to pick. The important thing is that the strap's taking some of the weight of the mandolin, so that when you hold it on your lap, it's not going to spin round like this all the time, for example, which would mean you'd have to use your left hand to hold the neck up, and we're going to use our left hand to play the amazing mandolin tunes that we're going to learn. So I hold the mandolin and upward at an angle of about 40 degrees and out from my body at an angle of about 40 degrees. So it's not round flat like this, which would bring this arm, my right arm, round really uncomfortably to play. It's not down low like this, because it makes it much harder to see where my fingers are going from the left hand. So up at about 40 degrees, out at about 40 degrees. Yeah? And my right arm comes across the mandolin here with a little bit of pressure on the side of the mandolin here. The palm of my right hand brushes against the strings just behind the bridge. Some people play with a completely free hand, but I find just that little bit of brushing just helps me to keep fixed where my hand is while I'm playing. And then I'm going to play the strings and the mandolin with the pick, which we'll talk about in a minute, maybe about an inch and a half behind the fretboard here. For each mandolin has a sweet spot, and the sweet spot is where it sounds nice when you're playing it. Basically, this one wants to be played about an inch and a half behind the bridge. You'll find the tone changes. If you come back towards the bridge, it gets much more trebly. If you come up towards the fretboard, it gets more bassy and full. So that's also something you can play with to change the tone as you're playing. Yeah? Now the pick, or plectrum as it's called, just about everybody plays a mandolin with a pick or plectrum rather than with their fingers. There's thousands of different sorts of picks out there. You can pay $40, £40 for a mandolin pick that's been hand shaped if you want to. I don't bother with that. These cost about 30p on eBay. Most mandolin players use a fairly heavy pick. That's quite a thick one. Because the thicker the pick, the more you drive the strings, the more tone you get out of the mandolin. This one is about 1mm thick, I think. You might find when you first start you want to use something a little bit thinner, but don't go too floppy with your mandolin pick. You can get picks that are like 0.3 of a millimetre or whatever, but they won't drive your mandolin to get enough tone out of the string. So I'd recommend starting on at least 0.6 or 0.7 of a millimetre, and then maybe working your way up a bit when you get used to playing. And we hold the pick in a relaxed way with our right hand. It's almost like you make a right hand shape, almost like you're holding a broom handle in that right hand shape, and then pop the pick in between your thumb and your first finger, and I hold it with about 1/2 to 3/4 centimetre sticking out. So if you can see what I'm doing there, I'm holding it just like that. So when I bring it over, my hand is that shape compared to the mandolin, yeah? If that's clear or not, I hope so, yeah? And then again, brushing lightly on the strings behind, and now I'm hovering over the strings. Yeah? Now we'll talk about the left hand in a minute. So we've got your new mandolin. The first thing you're going to need to do after you fit it with a strap and so is learn how to tune it. So the mandolin, it tunes same as a violin, which is why it's such a great instrument for playing all those fiddle tunes, both the American and the Irish jigs and reels. And so the bottom string on the mandolin, the most high-pitched one, this one, is an E. The bottom pair of strings, I should say. The next string up is tuned to an A. The next string up is tuned to a D. And the next string up is tuned to a G. And you might, if you know anything about music already, or you remember back from school what they taught you, one of the things you might remember is that the musical scale runs A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it starts again on an A, but that A is an octave higher than the previous one. So for example, this is an A, and this is an A an octave higher. Don't worry about how I'm doing that at the moment, we'll get to that later, yeah? But you also have things like sharps and flats in the musical scale in between those notes, but we will talk about those in due course when you need to know about them. So how do I get my mandolin in tune? Right, so these days it's very easy to use either an electric tuner, something like one of these. This one's made by a company called Snark. They're very good. It clips on the head of your mandolin up here. You switch it on and it tells you whether your mandolin's in tune or not. There's a little green line that comes on, a green light that comes on when it's bang on the E. Now if we put my mandolin out of tune for a moment, you can hear it's out of tune because suddenly you can hear two strings instead of one, and that's a bit of a trick with mandolins. If you can, when you play a pair of strings, we always play both the strings, don't worry about which one. When you play a pair of strings, if you can hear two strings there actually instead of just one tone, then the likelihood is that one of them is out of tune. I need to get that back in tune, and so I do that by constantly picking the out of tune string. If it's the top string I'm tuning of the pair, I pick downwards to hit the top string. If it's the bottom string I'm tuning, I pick upwards to make sure I'm hitting the bottom string. Very gently. And you keep playing it, and you turn the tuner for that string until on your electric tuner you get the green light and the tuner indicating that it's an E, the note, for that bottom string. There it is now. It should sound the same as the string below it. It does. So when I play them, they sound like one string. So remember that tip. If you've got pairs of strings, so the bottom pair is tuned to E, the next to A, the next pair to D, and the next pair to G. If you're tuning the very bottom string, pick upwards. If you're tuning the top of a pair of strings, pick downwards, and you'll hit that one. And keep picking while you tune, so you can see it gradually coming into tune on the tuner. Now the other thing you can do is that smartphones have apps, tuning apps now that work very well, so you can stick your smartphone down in front of you on the table and play the note and it will tell you whether you're in tune or not. So we're going to tune E, A, D, G. Your left hand position is a little bit more tricky than the right hand position. And everybody sort of has their own way with this. There isn't just one way of doing it, but there are some hints and tips. The first is you need it to be fairly relaxed, your left arm. I'll take this tuner off so it's out of the way. Again, you make a sort of shape with your left hand as if you were holding a broom handle, more or less, and you bring it up and you put it in somewhere behind, like me, between the first and the second frets. These are frets, these metal lines that run across the neck of the banjo. Your thumb would come up just above the fingerboard, and then your fingers come round to place on the neck of the banjo. Now, what you don't want to be doing at this stage is holding the mandolin like, did I say banjo just then? The mandolin like this, with your hand bent up like this, trying to do this, and you don't want to be doing this either. It's a fairly straight arm. Your left arm is going to be fairly straight. Not doing this, not doing this. Yeah. And if you can see what I've got going on there, but behind the neck of the mandolin, there's a little gap between my hand and the neck of the mandolin. My palm's not parallel to the neck of the mandolin, it's coming down at a bit of an angle. Not like this, but down like this a little bit. With a gap between my thumb and my first finger, there, a little bit of air space. Not hugging it tight like that. We don't want to be doing that. We're going to do that. Yeah. That's quite tricky, getting a good clean position there. And everybody does things slightly differently. The important thing is that when your fingers come down onto the neck of the mandolin, they are not fouling the other strings. So when you put your finger onto the neck, onto the fretboard being the black bit on the top of the mandolin, when you put your finger onto it, you curve over that shape. You want a concave finger, not a convex one. You're not coming down like that, you're coming down like that to get it clean. And when we play tunes, what we do is we put our finger behind different frets to make different notes. When we put our finger down, we try and put it close behind each fret, not far back. If you put it far back, it's hard to get a clean note. Far away from the fret, bring it forward, so it's just behind the fret and you get a nice clean note. Now, one other thing, when we start picking tunes, most of the tunes we're going to play to start with are going to be on the first 7 frets of the mandolin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And to make things easier for ourselves and to help the tunes flow, we are going to use particular fingers for particular frets. So the first 2 frets, this one, and this one, this one, and this one, we're going to play with our first finger on any of the strings. Yeah. So our first finger on the first 2 frets. Our second finger on the second 2 frets, that's frets 3 and 4, we say. Our third finger on the 5th and the 6th fret, and when we get up to the 7th fret, we're going to use our little finger, or our pinky. So when you're learning tunes early on, try to get into the habit of using the right fingers on the right frets, because that way, for example, you won't have to use the same finger twice quickly in a row between notes. You can skip from one finger to another to play the next note, mostly. So just to go over that again, first finger on the first 2 frets, second finger on frets 3 and 4, third finger on fret 5 and 6, and your pinky on fret 7. Yeah. Now, the other thing that's worth bearing in mind is that when we pick these tunes, they're fast, a lot of them. Yeah, they go quite quickly there. That tune, the Kerry Polka, we're going to learn in our first lesson. But they're fast. They're both the Irish and the American and all the gypsy tunes. Pretty much a lot of them go quite quickly. And so when you first started to learn to play the mandolin, it feels easier to pick downwards than it does to pick upwards, and so you can have a tendency to try and pick everything down, I think especially when you're concentrating hard. But at this stage it's important to get into the habit of picking things down, up, down, up, down, up. If you pick like that, then you can pick more quickly. Imagine if you're picking up one string and you've got to go down, and then the next note is down, and then the next note is down. You've got to come back around the string for another down. But if you're going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, there's more economy of movement with this hand. Yeah? So, try to get to the habit of picking down, up, down, up. And the motion with this hand It comes a little bit from the elbow and a little bit from the wrist. Most of mine from the wrist, but you'll notice my forearm is moving a little bit too. Nice and relaxed, yeah? Remember, you're holding the mandolin out at an angle of about 40 degrees, so there's no weird bend going on in this arm here. It's more or less straight. If when you're playing you find your muscles start to hurt for some reason, then probably you've got tension or you're holding things strangely in the bend. So have a look at what you're doing, try and analyse why that might be happening, and relax and try to make sure this hand is straight, yeah? And in this hand you're using no more pressure on the frets than you need to in order to make a clean note. I don't press hard enough, it's dull, but once I press hard enough, then it sounds nice. But I can press really hard there, it still sounds nice, but this hand is then working too hard. You can hurt yourself doing that sort of thing, yeah? Okay. So, over the coming lessons, as you learn to play the mandolin, there's going to be two different ways of playing almost that are going on. One is picking tunes, like playing each individual note of a fiddle tune. So that's one thing. And then the other thing we're going to want to learn to do, which is useful for accompanying other people or for stepping back when you're not taking your mandolin break if you're playing bluegrass, so that you're backing up the other instruments, or for singing songs, is playing of chords. When we play chords, we play more strings at once. So like this. There we're making chord shapes. We're putting two or more fingers down at once on different strings to make a shape. And in the coming lessons we'll be learning to both pick tunes and to play chords, to play backup, to be able to play songs and so on. So I think that's everything you need to know for now to get started. If you're ready to go, have a look at my next lesson where I show you how to play the Kerry polka, or I demonstrate the tune, the Kerry polka, and then get in touch with me to get a hold of the tabs or to come for a lesson or whatever, yeah? So the last thing I need to say at the end of the introductory lesson, my favourite thing, the one thing with learning music is it's a long journey. There's always new things to learn. You never get to the end of it. Once you get you hooked, it'll keep you happy and interested for life. And if there's one thing we can teach our students is that if you practice, you'll get better. And as you start getting better, it becomes fun. If you don't have the time to practice, then you find you don't get better and it can get really frustrating. Obviously you've got to cut yourself some slack if life's too busy, but if you could do 10 minutes a day, if you could pick your instrument up for 10 minutes a day, or you could do half an hour 3 or 4 times a week, you're going to find your playing gets better and better and you get hooked on learning. You want to learn the next thing and away you go. So practice. Thank you.